Well, welcome, and thank you for joining us for today for Notes from the Field, a SAGE post-occupancy evaluation of Ventana by Buckner, a SAGE webinar presented by Amy Carpenter, Migette Kaup, and Rob Simonetti. At this point, I'll turn it over to my fellow panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Amy Carpenter. I am an architect and principal at SFCS in the Philadelphia office.
Hi, and I am Migette Kaup. I'm a professor and researcher at Kansas State University.
And I'm Rob Simonetti. I'm a senior living leader at LaBella Associates and a board member of SAGE up in Rochester, New York. For those of you not familiar with SAGE, we are the Society for the Advancement of Gerontological Environments, a membership-based organization representing and promoting collaboration between all disciplines in the senior living industry. SAGE is pleased to present AIA-approved webinars every month. These webinars are free to SAGE members. Please visit sagefederation.org for information on SAGE membership. You will be muted throughout this webinar. You will have the option to type in any questions by clicking the Q&A button at the top of your screen. We will answer those questions at the conclusion of the session as time allows. SAGE is an approved AIA provider, and participants in this course are eligible for one AIA learning unit. Please note that you must be registered for and logged into the webinar to receive the credit and the certificate of completion. And please make sure that the name you used to log into the webinar corresponds to the name of your registration. SAGE will report credits earned by the course attendees to AIA CES and will provide certificates of completion within 1 week if requested. If you do not enter your member number or request a certificate upon registration, please email info@sagefederation.org. The information presented today is protected under copyright. So now that we've gone through the housekeeping, let's get started. Today, we will discuss Ventana by Buckner, a beautiful and award-winning high-rise life plan community in Dallas, Texas. Our team will highlight the numerous challenges this project faced, including a constrained site, multiple occupancies within the building, changes of administration, and the rise of a global pandemic. We will see why beauty is not the only measure of a good project. We'll learn how stated design goals translate into real-life operation, hear how the building is working for residents and staff, and discover why post-occupancy evaluation is a valuable tool for evaluating a building and use.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So let's jump in. And we would first like to begin with a big thank you to Joe Matari and the Mohawk Group for supporting this post-occupancy evaluation. And Joe, we'd love it if you could say just a few words.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, folks, and welcome to the presentation. This has been an amazing opportunity for us at Mohawk Group. We're very proud to be associated with this. I think you're going to find this being an incredibly rewarding webinar. For me personally, I will tell you that in the 35 years I've been in the interior finishes industry, this was a top 5 experience for me, no question, hands down. One of the most just wonderful and enlightening experiences. Getting to see behind the scenes, so to speak, and really getting to understand the design challenges and everything you all go through on a daily basis to make these environments comfortable and safe and wonderful for the residents. So on behalf of Mohawk Group, thank you for this opportunity, and I'll turn it back over to the wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so as Rob noted, the materials are copyrighted because content has been developed by 3 groups. So you will have an opportunity, we'll talk about this later, to get some more information through the white paper that we will put together for you. So let's jump in and talk a little bit first about SAGE, who we are. SAGE is a nonprofit organization of professionals from diverse areas of the field who come together with a focus on both person-centered or culture change sorts of organizational concepts and the built environment. As Lori oftentimes promotes in the information she sends out to all of our SAGE members, that SAGE is everything education. We are all about sharing information, passing it along, and that's one of the beautiful things about these webinars is we can actually help people understand kind of how projects come together. And we do a lot of work, both locally and nationally, to support these educational endeavors. So our mission is, again, we're a diverse network. We want to inspire and create environments where older adults can thrive. And to accomplish this, we leverage collaborative opportunities. We engage in research, education, advocacy, and innovation. And as we do this, and we think about how SAGE has a long history of pulling this sort of project together, we use the post-occupancy evaluation as a way to understand or take a look at buildings in use. And the process of the post-occupancy for our POEs is at an indicative level. We have kind of a very intense, but only one-day walkthrough with interviews from staff and residents. And even in that one-day experience on site, we are able to capture a rich array of content, information, and feedback. And we've been doing this since 1999. The other wonderful hallmark of the SAGE POE is that we always bring together a diverse group of individuals who see different parts of the project. So here you see our 2023 SAGE POE team, and each of these individuals brings a unique and important perspective to the process for that day and then the subsequent analysis. Another really important thing to recognize in our process is how do we select these locations? And so in order to really get the process started, we like to identify projects that have already been recognized for excellence through the Environments for Aging Design Showcase. So in essence, we're targeting projects that have already been peer-reviewed. We're looking for projects that have clearly stated programmatic design goals and hopefully something really unique, a design feature or a different sort of way of delivering service that we can learn from and then share with others, because everybody's wanting to know if those new innovative approaches and ideas kind of panned out the way that they were intended. And there's always something that we can pay forward and learn from each other. The other very important aspect of our POEs is that because we have been supplementing the POEs with a white paper in addition to these regular presentations at conference and the webinars, and publishing information and disseminating it widely helps us also contribute to the body of knowledge, which means that we need to follow the appropriate protocols to demonstrate that we're protecting the rights and interests of the individuals who contribute to our findings. So our team members always complete the federally mandated training through CITI for projects that use human subjects and research. And although interviews might seem innocent enough, we recognize that all residents and staff members who participate should understand that they're under no obligation to speak with us. And if they decide not to participate in our interviews, that their relationship with their home or organization will not be affected in any way. So we also, as part of that training, get refreshed and reminded about how to protect identities of users if they provide feedback. So in order to create that sense of protection and safety. And so we run the process through K-State's Institutional Review Board, and our Office of Research Compliance reviews our POE site and our research team on an annual basis. The interviews that we hold throughout the day-long process incorporate a variety of perspectives. We engage with various stakeholders and different user groups. Everybody is provided a description of the post-occupancy visit at least 3 weeks prior to our arrival. We make sure that everybody is informed, and so they consent to participate in those interviews. And photo releases are also obtained on any consent forms for anyone you see here or throughout the presentation. If you see someone's picture, they've given their permission for their photograph to be taken and used in published or presented materials, which again is a research protocol. So another step that our protocols have is to make sure that we have kind of a clear framework that we use to evaluate aspects of the environment. So we use the SAGE principles. And this represents kind of the attributes and outcomes that have been previously documented through research to be of value in the environment. So this is a really helpful framework by which we look at the goals and intentions of the project, and it helps guide our team. So lastly, again, we would like to make sure that we give a big shout out to the design teams involved in the Ventana project. HKS Architects and IDA did a tremendous job of pulling together a really excellent project that has a number of amazing outcomes. And we really thank them for all the input that they provided and hosting us while we were there at Ventana. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Amy, and she'll get us started on the actual outcomes of the post-occupancy.
Great. Thanks, Migette. Well, there's so much that we could talk about, but I know that we only have an hour to talk about today, so we're going to try to hit just the high points. But these were the major themes that bubbled up to the surface for what we saw. So we're going to hit each one of those. But first, we'd also like to thank Luke Krausen and Charlie Wilson from Buckner Retirement Communities, as well as Danica McGuire, who is the executive director at Ventana, for hosting us, as well as HKS and the whole team at IDA. So here is the site, and you can see it outlined in the red boundaries. And really, this was a very tough site to deal with. It was a leftover parcel out of a large planned urban development. And it's an oddly shaped 3.5 acre parcel, and it has 27 feet of grade change from the lower left corner down to the upper right corner. You can also see that it's also wedged in between a really busy highway and then a busy arterial road to the north. But it was a highly desirable neighborhood. It's a very wealthy neighborhood in Dallas, and it was a challenge for Buckner. They really wanted to put a project here, and this was the only site available. But the neighborhood plan also came with restrictions on height, restrictions on density, and just a whole lot of other challenges that had to be solved by the design team. I want to point out this large parking lot at the very top of your screen. That is the parking lot for the North Park Mall in Dallas. And this mall is very well known for, it's not only a shopping mall, but it also is an art gallery. It's owned by a wealthy art collector who has some really phenomenal pieces of art on display at the mall. So that's a big draw to the area. I also want to point out this shopping center. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving, but there's a shopping center just south of the arterial road that has some shops and restaurants. One of the things that the Buckner folks and the design team tried to do was negotiate getting a sidewalk to connect Ventana to this shopping center. But unfortunately, the owners of this commercial office building and parking garage decided that no, they didn't want to do that. So unfortunately, there's no sidewalks that connect the shopping center to Ventana, but it is not too well of a traveled road, so it's okay. I also want to point out right across the street from Ventana to the left of the site is a whole townhouse development. Just keep that in mind. This is all residential townhomes, but keep that in mind because we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so here's the details. It is a large building. It opened in August of 2019, which everybody knows that the world shut down not too long afterwards. In fact, it was only open for 7 months before COVID shut everything down, and shut it down for 14 months. The executive director, Danica, she started the week that the world shut down. So she really had her work cut out for her, poor thing. It is a 12-story building plus 2 underground parking levels. point out that it was built for $211 a square foot. And boy, isn't that a dream in today's construction economy? I just wish that we could still get those numbers. It has 189 independent living apartments, 38 assisted living, 26 memory support, 46 skilled nursing, and it does have a 24-bed short-term rehab. So we saw that this project was a tale of many challenges. I already mentioned the very tight site that was surrounded by very active roads and highways, but because the building took up so much of that site, like they needed to capitalize on every square foot that they could get of the building site, there was no laydown space and no space for job trailers. So those townhouses across the street that I mentioned before, when we're looking at the map, that's where the workers had to rent those townhouses for both their job trailers, but also they had to, a lot of them lived there during construction because there really is no mass transit near the site. So, and also no parking. So they had to take advantage of those townhouses. We talked about the conflicts with the neighbors, that the office building didn't want to play nice with them and let them have a sidewalk. But then we also had some other challenges, such as the executive director who was involved in the design process all through the design, suddenly died, right before the building opened, which left a huge gap in the knowledge of how the building was meant to operate. In fact, Danica was the third executive director that they had. Which, not only did COVID throw her for a loop, but she also had to figure out how to operate this new building without any clues from the executive director who was there during the design. In fact, there was changes in the top 5 leadership positions. And of course, we mentioned COVID, but they also had a big ice storm in Texas. I don't know if anybody heard about that, but yeah, that set them off for a loop there. And then, of course, the ongoing staffing crisis has made it hard for them. So here is a view of a model. Fortunately for us, the design team had a physical model built, and this was left in the sales and marketing offices. So this really helps us. We're going to use it to describe the site and the building a little bit. So this is the main street view. The street that separates the townhouses from Ventana is here at the bottom. This over here is the healthcare entrance, and then around on the right hand side is the main independent living entrance. So most traffic would be coming from the right hand side, so you're going to hit the independent living drop off first, or if you would hit the healthcare drop off. Here's the rear side or the highway view, and you can start to see the grade change here, even in the model, and how they have 2 floors of the parking garage that's really buried completely on the street side, but it's completely exposed on the highway side. But this also worked well to allow them to have the parking garage because there was no on-grade parking available, and it gave them an opportunity from some branding along the highway. You can also see that there's just not a lot of ground space for outdoors, but what they had, they used to really good advantage. At the main entry feature, at the entry court for the independent living entrance, they had a nice water feature. They snuck in a dog park in the corner here, and then they were able to pop out a 1-story building for a swimming pool in the back. And here's the stacking diagram that HKS created. I want to point out that in the purple, we have the short-term rehab accessed right off the healthcare entry. And then in the Tower 1, we have 2 floors of skilled nursing. And then we have the 4th floor is all common space. 5th floor is the memory care. And then we have independent living above that. And then in the South Tower, we have common space on the 1st floor, 2 floors of assisted living, and then the rest is all IL. And of course, the 2 levels of parking below. Here is the first floor, ground floor plan. You can see that we have the short-term rehab unit with 24 beds here. And then the rest of the floor is all common space or admin space. Second floor, again, in the North Tower, we have 2 households of skilled nursing, and then we have assisted living on the second floor in the South Tower. Same on the third floor, 2 households of skilled nursing and then assisted living. Because of the site constraints, the bulk of the common space for the building had to be moved to the 4th floor. And we'll get into the uses of all these spaces, but then here you start seeing the independent living units starting. The 5th floor, we have the memory support. We have the center connector building stops at the 4th floor. So we have an opportunity for a green roof. And then we have independent living. And then the typical floors take over after that with all independent living. But we do have what they call Sky Lounge on the 12th floor, which has a great view of downtown Dallas. In the parking level, you could see that it's an odd shaped site and they had to take advantage of it and get in all the parking that they needed. They wound up doing tandem parking, which got them the numbers of parking spaces that they needed. But unfortunately, it's really a challenge for operations. Even though they do have valet service, residents will often come down and want the car in the back, but they don't have the right keys with them or both sets of keys. So it's become kind of, unfortunately, I want to say wasted space. Yes, they got the parking count that they need, but it doesn't really work well for them. All right, so let's get into the challenges. Challenge 1 is, how do we fit a high rise on a very tight site and what comes along with that? So first, with any building, it's challenging to hide the service traffic, but for a high rise on a really tight site, it's almost impossible. We do have the loading dock at the back of the building on the highway side, just past the entrance to the parking garage. However, we have the commercial kitchen on the 4th floor with all of the dining venues. So that means that, all of the food has to get up there and all of the trash has to come down. So we do have, here's the garage floor plan. We have the loading dock, and then here's the service elevator that comes up to the main kitchen. We also have a trash room with trash chutes in each of the towers. So trash room for the South Tower comes here. Comes down the chute into this dumpster, then they have to push these dumpsters across and then out to the loading dock. Not the best, but it works operationally to get the trash out. The trash room in the North Tower goes straight out to the loading dock, which is a little bit easier. But as you see on the floor plan, they originally intended to have swing doors there. That luckily, at some point they went to a roll-up door, which works a lot better. But one of the lessons learned is they really should have had both a wider opening would have been helpful, but heavy-duty corner guards would have been really useful to have on here, because you can see how beat up these walls are getting. Because even if there's plenty of room for the dumpster to get out, it's not easy to push that and keep it completely straight. So as I mentioned, the service elevator comes up and it backloads into the main kitchen. The main kitchen is, this is really where you start seeing the hospitality concept shine through, but because this kitchen is perfectly positioned to serve various dining venues on this floor. And by the way, did we mention that Ventana partnered with a celebrity chef, Stephen Piles, for the food service program? And this certainly heightens the resident experience and helps in marketing. I mean, how wonderful is it to live in a place that has a celebrity chef as your main chef? So it has helped with the marketing, but Ventana has reported that it's really hard to find kitchen staff that can execute the menu on such a high level. In fact, they mentioned that just one of Stephen Piles' recipes was 15 pages long. That's a lot. And I think that was a dessert. So, but there are technically 4 different dining venues on this floor, and all of them have a different vibe. First, you have the bistro on the left-hand side, which is Cafe Americano. And this is really a place for fast casual dining. And it also has a really generous outdoor terrace for al fresco dining, which is very nice. Next is the landing for coffee and breakfast in the morning. And then this turns into a cocktail bar in the evening. And then the right-hand side of the landing is the exhibition cooking station for Mediterrano. Mediterrano is a reservation only, dinner only weighted service with a Mediterranean focused menu. And then last but certainly not least is Dorado, which is also reservation only, also dinner only, and has a high-end steakhouse menu. For the care levels, the food comes down the main kitchen and down from the main kitchen, and again through the service elevator. And unfortunately, all of the focus and attention paid to the high-end cuisine for the IL dining doesn't really translate into the food quality for the care levels. The assisted living kitchen here really has no provision for cooking anything to order. All the food is just brought down in steam trays and put into the steam table to be served. And the report is that the food quality just is not to the same level. Danica, the executive director, did report that the food service quality in the care levels is one of her next challenges that she's going to tackle. She feels really strongly that there should not be a difference in food service or quality between the levels of care, and we strongly agree with that. So back to the circulation. Another challenge in a high-rise building, obviously elevators are critical. And we do have 3 groups of elevators in this building. In the North Tower, we have 3 passenger elevators and 1 service elevator. In the middle, we have a dedicated elevator that just serves floors 1 through 3. So it accesses the healthcare lobby and just up to the healthcare levels. And then in the South Tower, we have 1 service elevator and 2 passenger elevators. Interestingly, we were told that the original design intent was for the service elevator on the North Tower to only be for service. And what we heard was that they tried to lock out this elevator and use it just for service. However, then the residents complained that they had to wait too long for an elevator, and they saw that there was another door that just was never opening. So the management put the service elevator back into service for residential use as well. Now, unfortunately, the residents complain and get upset with staff when they see them on that elevator, even though that's the elevator the staff is supposed to be using. They kind of have I guess, remember, this is a very affluent community, a very high-end community, and they don't feel like they should be intermixing with the staff. Plus, because it's used for resident use, it increases the wait and travel times for staff, which also impacts the food quality when you're bringing it to the care levels. What I think is really interesting is that there are only 3 elevators on the south side, and that seems to work. Why do they need 4 on the north side? For Ventana, what we suggested is that we would recommend locking out this elevator again and making it only used for service. And then just make sure that you have the other 3 elevators as fast of a travel speed as you can do. One other point that we made that we noticed is that there are no benches in the elevator lobbies. And we think that perhaps giving people a place to sit would help with the perceived wait times for the elevators. Now, speaking of the elevator lobbies, this is the North Tower elevator lobby, and this is the South Tower elevator lobby. Do you see a strong difference? Now, keep in mind that these are on different floors, but all of the elevator lobbies looked exactly the same. We just never knew if we were in the North Tower or the South Tower unless we paid really close attention. We really felt that these lobbies could have been differentiated in some way to help with wayfinding, even just a different floor between the 2, or an accent paint, or even just some more distinctive artwork. They do have signage in the elevator lobbies that talk about the, where to find it, and which clearly says which tower you're in, but even the signs for each tower are exactly the same color. That could have been a little bit different to help with wayfinding. And we weren't the only ones that had difficulty wayfinding. New employees, we were told, have to shadow their manager for 3 days before they can learn the layout of the building. One of the other problems was the way that the units were numbered. We have unit N702 in the North Tower and S702 in the South Tower. So packages are getting sent to the wrong places, and staff is even going to the wrong apartment often. We think that maybe it would have been easier if they put, like, say, odd number units in one tower and even numbers in the other tower. That could have at least helped everyone differentiate a little bit better. We do have to pay homage to the artwork in the building. And yes, this is a very high-end product, and you would expect exceptional artwork, but this truly was some really, really nice artwork. And it went with the theme, the North End Mall, which was an art gallery as well. It kind of tied into the neighborhood. However, the one disappointment that we had is, with the exception of a few pieces, like the birds you see in the lower right corner and the Rubik's Cube wall, which that was my term for it, looked like Rubik's Cubes to me. The rest was just kind of abstract, and it wasn't really distinctive enough to help with wayfinding. Okay, challenge 2. As we mentioned, the site is at the on and off ramp for a very large freeway. It's also really close to the arterial road, so traffic noise was a real concern. The designers they specified a special acoustically rated laminated glass throughout the whole building, and really this does a phenomenal job of cutting out the road noise. You really don't realize it until you try to open the doors to the patio, and that's when you really realize how noisy it is outside. The one downfall is that glass, that laminated glass, is really heavy. So, it's hard to open the door, and then also the wind load on that door makes it really tough to open. But, it's a small price to pay for cutting out all of that noise. At the ground level, the design team did a really good job of creating this really nice sound barrier out of a curving steel wall. And it also has a solid concrete wall behind it, which really stops the noise. And it creates a really nice visual detail and kind of helps the outdoor room feel, because it kind of encloses the area. Unfortunately, the one weird thing that we noticed is that the wall stops the direct noise from the highway, but the noise comes and bounces off the building above the wall and then bounces back down at you. So you're experiencing the noise coming from a different direction and from above you, which it kind of, it's a little unsettling. It throws you off. And I mean, I don't have any idea on how to stop that noise coming and bouncing off the building, but hopefully some acoustical engineers out there could give us some ideas. So that brings us to the topic of outdoor space. With a very tight site, outdoor space was at a premium. However, the design team were able to make some really special spaces. They did a really good job of creating multiple ways to get outside from every level. And certainly this is not easy in a high rise, but they made it happen. Even the fitness room has a little balcony to go out and cool off, or perhaps exercise with a small group. And the 4th floor staff lounge even has its own outdoor patio. I've never seen that before. Like, not only does the staff lounge have windows to the outside, but it has an outdoor space. And all of these spaces were all shaded from the sun, protected from the rain, and most of them had ceiling fans to temper the heat. So we really applauded the creativity and commitment to getting folks outside from all levels of care. The most impressive of the outdoor spaces, perhaps, is the roof garden off the 5th floor. And you can see Joe here from Mohawk taking advantage of the putting green. He was right on top of that. The one thing that we wish was done perhaps a little bit better was the access to the secured memory care garden from the dining space. It's kind of a little awkward and tucked into the corner of the dining room. And when we asked Grant Warner from HKS about that, he said that there was a variance restriction that required this screening wall to be pushed back and limited where this edge of the roof deck or the building could be, which kind of unfortunately set them up for this awkward connection point. However, they created an outdoor space for all levels of care, including the memory care, which was really pretty cool. And then the last part of this challenge is that they created a hole in the building. And this is a really clever trick so that they could get natural light into the center of this very large floor plate for the common spaces. And the way that it was detailed is really what makes it wonderful. It goes from the 5th floor roof deck all the way down to the 2nd floor, which is the base level of skilled nursing and assisted living. And then they created this little Zen garden out in the bottom of the light well. The one thing I wish is that there was some seating opportunities out here. You can get out here, but there's nothing to do and nowhere to sit. The one other really nice feature is this whole light well was crisscrossed vertically and horizontally by string lights, which created a really nice interest at nighttime. And Grant Warner noted that the installation is called Constellation, and it was inspired by the Buckner's children's homes. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
All right, thank you, Amy. So this is the first project to try to integrate the greenhouse model design into a multi-story life plan community. The combination of the site, as Amy described previously, and the independent living apartment units above the skilled nursing households necessitated more of a linear layout for the households than is typically considered desirable. So this is one area that our team was interested to see how the design team resolved that. Here in the center, we see a very typical greenhouse home partie, where resident rooms wrap around the hearth area of a living room, dining room, and kitchen. The required corridor in red is always present, but de-emphasized in the homes as it is considered an institutional image. The design issues noted are those that are important in household design, and we'll discuss some of these as we tour the home. So here we see the Ventana floor plan again at the 2nd floor, where we have 2 skilled nursing households in blue, which share the floor with an assisted living unit in purple. We'll focus just on the skilled areas. When we overlay the similar graphics to the 2 households, we can see more clearly the partie of each home. While home number 1 is very constrained by the linear wing, home number 2 benefits from its position and ability to wrap the corner, putting more of the resident rooms around the hearth area. And then additionally, the balcony area in home 2 is directly off the living room, which is a significant benefit. In home 1, although the balcony is part of the home, it reasons an away space at the end of the hall. And we know generally that in skilled nursing, these spaces are not highly used. Excuse me. So moving to the living areas. Because home 2 was occupied, we were able to tour the unoccupied home number 1. Here we see the view of the living room immediately upon entering the home. This is very nice and sets a strong, warm, welcoming residential image. The materials, colors, and details are rich and attractive and very consistent with all the other finishes of Ventana. I do want to point out the linen cart at the end of the fireplace. As I walk through, I would interpret this as a sign that linens are not being done on the household as they would be in the greenhouse model, and or that there may not be enough storage space in the homes. And we do know that the houses are not being run on the greenhouse model principles. The staff early on rejected the universal worker concept, and the changes in leadership mentioned earlier have led the households to being operated in a more traditional manner, with food being prepared in the central kitchen and then brought down to the households, linens as well. And we will see the impact of that in a moment. As we move to dining, We see the dining room is just beyond the shared fireplace feature with the living room. Dining has ample room and daylight and a strong connection to the kitchen area. I love that they have a high chair available for their little guests, but they probably could have done it without the institutional garbage can next to it. A couple of things to point out. The shared feature fireplace is beautiful. It creates a nice separation between living room and dining. And while this defines the spaces, it may also create an impediment to knowing what is happening in the living room for staff who may be spending time in the kitchen. In the greenhouse model, it's always a balancing act of trying to create intimate and separate spaces, but trying to maintain the transparency through the home so that staff and residents feel secure and engaged. Also, the wall separating the kitchen from the dining is the kitchen from the dining room is quite high. We have seen in successive generations of greenhouse homes that wall getting lower and lower and actually going away in most to truly create an accessible kitchen experience for residents, promoting engagement with staff, as well as a sense of normal home environment. In the next slide, the kitchen is well set up for cooking meals in the home with an induction cooktop and residential appliances. If they get back to the greenhouse model, they will be well served, I think, by the kitchen design. Two items to consider. Number one is the ice maker down at the end of the counter next to the refrigerator. That's typically something we can try to put into the pantry because the ice maker makes a lot of noise as it's making and churning the ice. And that noise is just now directly bounced out into the hardscape of the kitchen and the dining room. So it often is very impactful on the ability of the residents, the staff to have conversations. So generally, again, we like to put that just around the corner in the pantry where it's quiet. And then the hood. This hood is not terrible. It's a type 1 commercial hood. But now we do have NFPA compliant hoods that really are completely residential in nature and image and have fire suppression and can blend right in. So that's just something to keep in mind in future designs. The small photo is the pantry behind the kitchen. This appears much more institutional than we would expect for a 12-bed home that we would likely need. The large 3-bay sink implies heavy volume and a kitchen staff. And we know in the greenhouse model that with limited staff, we can't really afford to have someone tucked away in the back pantry doing dishes. And so we would normally see that just a residential 3-bay sink right out in the kitchen so that staff could do their cleaning while still being engaged with the elders. In the plan graphic, I'd like to point out that the impact of operating the more traditional model brings services up from the central elevator location. In the situation, meals would be brought down right from the 4th floor 3 times a day. And that routing comes in from the service elevator along this little back corridor to the back door, through the living room, and then through the dining room to get through the kitchen into the pantry. So that's a lot. And then of course, soiled dishes, carts, and trash are all going back out in the same manner. So now if we were operating on a greenhouse model, it would be a little bit different because food would only be brought up to the pantry maybe once every 2 or 3 days, and all the meals are prepped and cooked right on the unit. So this design is not faulty in its anticipation it was going to be run on the greenhouse model, and if it had been, it would be much more successful. But now as we fall back to the traditional model, it has impacts. So a couple of ideas for a future household or even a change that could be possible here would be to separate the back door from the front door a little bit more. And that could be done by simple reconfiguration of that room right there, which is the den, such that from the service elevator, you'd have more direct access to the hallway of the household. And then also we'd normally like to put the pantry right off the hallway of the home so that you don't have to go move through the kitchen. And this way you would create a direct line from the back hall down the hallway to the pantry, and you would still bypass all those important spaces, but you would not be moving through them. Next is the hallway. So this was something that's interesting. I was interested in because of the linear nature of the greenhouse home here. But here I see, the resident hall, I would say, is not much of a detriment to the model. As I may have thought when I reviewed the plans. I think because of the generous width, the undulations in the wall, an attractive handrail, I don't see this as a real burden to the residents. It is a bit longer than I would normally like to see, but because of the visibility from the kitchen and the living areas, I feel that residents will feel generally very secure coming out from their door and knowing it's a short distance to the public areas of the home. Of course, if they had an opportunity for a seating area, maybe middle hall, that would also benefit the elders on that little bit of a longer hall. The bedrooms are very spacious and ample with ample room should a resident want to bring some of their own furniture in. What sort of a hallmark of the greenhouse model is being to allow people to bring some things in. They're special to them, of course. The rooms are all have overhead lifts going to the toilet and shower. And here the design team handled the bathroom door very well, probably the best I've seen. And it was a really difficult detail to transition that overhead lift through the bathroom door. So job well done here by the design team. The furniture in the bedroom is probably far more institutional than anything that we saw at Ventana. And given the high-end nature that Amy spoke about and the residents, might be difficult for those residents coming from independent and assisted living to come into this environment. Very often in the greenhouse homes, we are seeing adopters using double beds and actually true residential furniture. And that is certainly something that could be implemented here still that I think would make the transition to the skilled nursing unit much more successful. The bathrooms, I would rate as excellent with everything needed for resident safety and use. The vanities are large. It gives a lot of space for personal belongings and queuing things you need for the day. Nice storage cabinet to the left, which can be used by both residents and staff for supplies. And the toilet is right on line with the bed and has ample clear room around it for maneuvering. Although often in a skilled nursing environment, we would see the toilet at 24 inches off the wall with fold-down grab bars to aid in a two-person assist. The overhead lift in this particular room had a turntable to go into the shower, although not all rooms had that. And here even the design team or our POE team did question, all right, once you're on the track to the shower, you're still encumbered by the shower rod. So more often in greenhouse homes, we see the track simply going straight to the toilet, and then any assistance to get to the shower, you would just lower down into a shower chair. So you can avoid the cost of that turntable, and that turntable is not the prettiest thing either, right? But the shower itself is great. The shower is well laid out with controls that are easy for staff to assist a resident and a flush threshold with the linear drain to help keep water off the bathroom floor, which is really important, protect from slips and falls. And I also want to point out just simply that the shower is in its own space and it reads really as a traditional residential space. Some of the smaller but important spaces, we have the home office and the den. On the upper left is the home office. I missed the home office on the tour because it was at the end of a short staff hall, which Amy's pointing out there on the plan. And if I missed it, the residents will miss it too. Remember the household model, the smaller number of staff with a smaller number of staff, it's important to keep them visible to be engaged with the residents. So an isolated office is not necessarily good for residents or staff. The den we found to be typical of many den spaces that lack from being intentionally themed as a residential space. So it is often a multi-purpose room for staff meetings, care meetings, or resident TV room, sort of falls victim to not being strongly themed and therefore may go unused by residents. You know, I would walk in the room and the room should tell me how I'm supposed to use it. And I'm not sure here if this room tells me how I'm supposed to use that room. So we might see it themed as a home office or a library, puzzle room, just again, something more engaging for residents to draw them in. So in this home, I might suggest that the office be moved to the den space, which would be an ideal location for resident engagement, right there at the front door and right off the living room would be a great place for staff. And then the last spaces outside of the home, again, Amy mentioned these already, some of the outside spaces. The elevator lobby on each floor serves 2 households. This was one spot in all of Ventana that I did not feel seemed to match the aesthetic of the overall project, which was really lush and rich. The lobbies were a little stark and read almost institutional, which was unfortunate as these were the entrances to the skilled nursing households. Now, of course, this is not a terrible, difficult fix. Perhaps the change of flooring and just bring some of the softness of the rest of the spaces of Ventana to that lobby. And of course, as soon as you step into the door of the household, you get back to that beautiful, rich environment. And then, as noted, Ventana did an amazing job getting the outside spaces at all the occupancies of the building, including the households. But because Dallas is so windy, the building height and its location adjacent to the highway, the spaces are sometimes difficult to use. The wind is a problem in the patios, as well as the doors people try to push or pull them open and at risk of the door being caught by the wind, which can be dangerous. And then you see here the differentiation between the tiles on the floor and the gravel, which is a nice detail, but in the skilled nursing occupancy, it might be a tripping hazard or a wheelchair edge, falling off that edge, which would be rough for residents. So to deal with the wind and the noise, it might not be unreasonable on these floors to consider how we might enclose those floors or screen from wind and noise a little bit better. Overall beautiful. I think a job well done on integrating the skilled nursing greenhouse model homes into what is a little bit more of a linear partie than we would normally see.
All right, thanks, Rob. So just if we're getting up to time, so just a few concluding thoughts. First, a lot of the things we mentioned as perhaps things that were able to be improved, I think stemmed from a disconnect between design and operations. We mentioned that the original executive director who was involved during the design process died unexpectedly right before the opening. And I think that a lot of the knowledge and the thought behind why things were done a certain way wasn't translated through to the staff that was actually running the project. So I think I just want to stress that it's really important to make sure that the operational program and how the building is going to be operated is set pretty well before the design team even gets going. And then the design needs to respond to that operational program. And it should be supporting the way that it's intended to work. I would also encourage folks to get staff involved during the design process and then make sure that the startup training for all other staff matches that operational programming. We strongly think that one elevator really needed to be a dedicated service elevator and should be taken out of service for the residents. I think that'll help a lot with the staff transport as well as food quality going down to the healthcare levels. And, a high-rise building like this should have a dedicated service elevator. And last but not least, I know that especially in a high-rise and especially on a tight site, every single square foot is important and every square foot costs money. But what we found in this particular project was that there was really a lack of storage space. It was not large enough and not in the areas that it was really needed. So don't shortchange the storage space. That's something that's really, really important, especially around the kitchen and dining areas. Very important. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rob to finish this out and then ask questions.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So this concludes the AIA CES education portion of the course, but we're not quite done. We have a few more minutes to go through any questions you may have. You should see a question and answer button in the upper left corner of your screen. Just click that and type your question if you have not already. And let's see, we don't have any questions yet. Let's see if we get any, but Amy or Migette, any further thoughts on things you saw, special moments, things you were surprised by?
One thing I would say is often a common question is that people would like to have a copy of the presentation. And what we'd like to say is stay tuned. We're going to put out a white paper that has this and more. And it'll be packaged in a much more easily retrievable way that has more depth to the narration. So if you want to know more about this POE, we will be endeavoring to get that out sooner rather than later.
And
that's great. Thank you, Migette. That's important.
This is Lori with Sage, and I'll just chime in. You may be wondering, how do I get a copy of that white paper? Well, if you registered for this session, you're now in our email list. And we will be sending it out to everyone in our email list. So have no fear. the white paper will be there.
All right, great. And for Migette, I think one of the questions is what sort of questions were asked of the residents? I assume this means while we were out on the POE, and how were those used in review of the building?
So, yeah, one of the things we have to do when we submit our IRB is actually kind of provide the type of outline of the types of things that we might be asking folks. And as Amy noted, we're looking for where different stakeholders see the built environment working with the expectations that they have for either their jobs or their lives. So food is a good example of, when they had this amazing food service plan and package. So when we talked to dietary staff, we were asking them questions that had to do with how does this environment help you deliver the type of food service that you are trying to make happen on these different levels. That's how you begin to discover where the environment and operations are kind of like hitting each other on the nose and not really working in concert. The resident questions were also, this was really interesting. And we found that while we were asking residents about how they liked the built environment, what was working well for them, was there anything not working well for them, you could really tell that the influence of the pandemic and the challenges with the consistent staff were a common theme. And we had to remind the residents a couple of times that we weren't there to evaluate the staff. We were really focused on the built environment. And we encouraged them if they had concerns that they wanted to convey about service delivery to make sure that the administrators of Ventana, knew what their preferences would be. But we absolutely are looking at built environment, and how it supports people or where they feel like maybe something's missing. And we use the environment for aging showcase kind of application as a starting point for those questions.
Great, thank you. And another question is regarding the swinging door versus sliding door for the resident bathroom doors, and what kind of feedback we saw on the doors to the resident bathrooms. And I would say that the sliding door is very typical when you consider a 3-foot clearance to get into a bathroom. A 3-foot swing door really is killer and detrimental to the floor pan of the bedroom and its usability. So we very often do try to go with the sliding door. You can even put furniture in front of that sliding door, so it takes up literally no space. The inch or inch and a half of the door itself. And with the properly weighted door and the right track, it's still easy for the residents to use.
Yeah.
And next question.
Wait,
go ahead, Amy.
Rob, if I could, I just wanted to chime in that I've done a number of stays where I was using a 24-hour stays in communities where I was using either a wheelchair and a walker, and the sliding door by far was so much easier to operate and just maneuver in and out of the bathroom. So I'm a big proponent of the sliding door as well.
All right. And a question from Brett LaFleur. How is the POE process with senior living? How has the POE process with senior living changed over time with COVID and with your experience with multiple POEs? That's a great question.
That is a great question. So obviously we are always very attentive to a provider's protocols for safety. We have in the past, kind of like post-COVID, there have been spaces where obviously if they need us to mask up, we mask up. And we're just attentive to the fact that people's heightened level of awareness for, having others in their environment has sometimes taken on a slightly different dimension, and we try to be abundantly respectful of that. So I guess from my perspective, those are some of the things that I've seen. Amy, do you have any other insights on that?
Yeah, I would just say, I know that we weren't allowed to go in certain areas that were occupied because I think of the COVID protocols, that they were really more concerned about us being there and just, didn't want us to interact with certain groups of residents. And I understand that, but it does make it a little bit harder to get across sampling and see actually how the spaces are being used, by the residents when we can only look at it an unoccupied space.
Great, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our questions we've received. So thank you all for joining us today, and special thanks to my co-panelists for sharing your time and your expertise. In just a moment, all attendees will be prompted to fill out a course evaluation survey. If you would, we would very much appreciate hearing your thoughts. And also all webinar registrants will receive a link to the recording of today's session via email within a few business days. So on behalf of SAGE, thank you all for joining us.